Welcome to Keeping Secrets, hosted by Julia Baum and Sabrina Tropper.
We're two licensed therapists here to give you an insider's perspective on therapy in today's modern world.
Whether you're a therapy goer, you've never been to therapy, or you have experience in the field, this podcast is for you.
We thank you for listening. Subscribe to Keeping Secrets to never miss an episode, and we hope you enjoyed today's show.
Welcome, everyone, to the very first episode of Keeping Secrets with myself, Julia Baum, and
myself, Sabrina Tropper.
So, today will be our first introductory sort of episode. We're going to be discussing how we got to the point of starting a podcast as two independent therapists in private practice. We'll discuss like what we've been through to get here, some trials and tribulations, talk about our intentions for the podcast. And here we go.
Awesome. Thanks so much for getting us started, Julia. So this podcast has been a long time coming, I think, if that's the right way to say it. Julia and I started talking about this, gosh, how long ago now? Almost 2 years? Is that possible?
I was thinking it was like 1.5 years, but maybe 2 years. I don't know.
Let's say 1.5 years.
Let's go with 1.5 years.
Yeah. We started talking about this 1.5 years ago because, first we wanted to just kind of collaborate and do a project together and feel free to interrupt and let me know if I'm like forgetting something. Mm-hmm. But we wanted to just kind of collaborate as two therapists. We both wanted to try something new, but also related to what we already know and do, which is psychotherapy. And we ended up just kind of landing on the idea of a podcast. And our initial idea, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, was to do something that was sort of adjacent to what we already do in our day-to-day. So not completely psychotherapy and mental health, because that is, like I said, we do that day in and day out and love it, but we wanted to add something and something that might make it to a bigger audience or just more people somehow. So that's kind of in a nutshell how we got to where we got. And it's been a journey for us because this is like, I've never done anything really like this. I know, Julia, you haven't either, right?
Never, ever, ever.
Yeah. So I know personally it was a struggle in a way that I wasn't anticipating in the beginning. I didn't anticipate some of the hurdles, but we got through them, and I'm so proud of us that we're here, we're doing it. What do you think?
Yes, there were so many obstacles for us as trained therapists that have absolutely no experience in recording a podcast or anything like it. I mean, even just determining like what program do we use to record this?
Yeah.
Which microphones do we buy? What little like foam thingy do we buy to put on top of the microphone? Just like all these little details that took a lot of research because we both have no experience in this area. We're also both, I think this is fair to say, more of like a listener type person.
It is fair.
It's really different role to be the one who's like doing all the talking. And
yes.
So there's like emotional hurdles and psychological hurdles of, identity, explorations. Who am I if I'm the one being in, on the camera? But So it's been a lot from, technical and even just logistically with both of us having a private practice, finding times to meet and being consistent
Mm-hmm.
with that has been a challenge. So all of this has been the accumulation of, I think, a lot of steadiness on our part, just
Yeah.
staying the course, baby
Yes.
steps. And we're here and we are not pretending to be experts in the podcast arena at all. But I think it's fair to say we are experts in therapy and in what we do. And we have a lot
Yep.
to say about that. We've both been in private practice for many years.
Yeah. And
Um,
in the mental
yeah.
health field for a combined 20 years
Yes.
between
Yeah.
the two of us.
Combined 20 years of experience in
Yeah.
the mental health field. So we have a lot to say, a lot of
Yeah.
opinions. Um, so, yeah, maybe we could speak a little bit about our intentions for this podcast.
Yes. I'd love that. Thanks. And I want to just mention, this is a little random, but so both Julia and I have a prior background in the arts. I think um, that may have been a factor in our desire to do something else or something new. Julia majored in fine art. I'm sorry, photography
Mm-hmm.
um, in undergrad, and I majored in music, music performance. So I thought, um, silly enough, that I would be able to kind of remember all the stuff I had learned years ago and think about like, but I wasn't a recording artist. I wasn't in this, or I also, the equipment is foreign to, anyway, my point is, even with that background, it was hard. It was a hard transition.
Mm-hmm.
So that said, shall we transition into our intentions for this podcast?
Yeah, for sure. But that is a
Yeah,
great point. There is something creative about both of
yeah,
us that I think contributed to this point.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought of that and needed to share. It's a little aside from where we were going, but um, all right. So yeah, so our intentions for this podcast were to focus on what we've noticed in our therapy clients and practice in terms of like cultural changes out in the world and how they're influencing mental health and our therapy work, along with how trends in social media have also been shifting things. Um, feel free to add anything to that, or what do you think, Julia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I say, we've been doing this a long time, but in the grand scheme of counseling, it's just, a little subsect of time. But even within that,
Yeah.
we've seen changes in terms of what people are coming, like the kind of things people come in wanting to work on or talk about, what they expect to get out of therapy, what they expect of the therapist. There's definitely been shifts, and it's really interesting as, as individual practitioners to see that. And I think we're both craving to kind of process that together.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's an interesting topic for us, we're thinking it's likely to be interesting for other people too. So why not
Yeah.
share the conversation?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the best way to put it. Um, it's things are really changing, especially, not just culturally out in our world. We're in North America, just if in case anybody's listening from elsewhere. But also sociopolitically, things are changing, and we're not, really going to focus as much on politics, if at all. Really, I think our intention was pretty clear from the beginning, was to just kind of see how are people being affected now in the way that the world has changed, and a lot of that can be seen on not on social media, but from social media. For example, I have clients all the time that come in and tell me about their interactions with social media. And, oh, I saw this thing on TikTok, and, and I've been thinking about this, and it's weird. It just came up because, the algorithm is based on your interests and what you spend time looking at. So it's going to feed you sort of what you want to see.
Right.
And that is a challenge that we, as not just as therapists, but I think just as people, when I was in high school, there wasn't really social media yet, not in the way that it is now. And things have just changed so much. So yeah, it's really like about a lot. It's been adapting. It's been a process of adaptation and kind of figuring things out as they
Mm-hmm.
change.
Yeah. And therapy itself has, you know, the stigma has gone down. It's still there for sure,
Yeah.
but so much effort has gone into destigmatizing it. So I think more people are going to therapy, talking about their therapy experiences, and that's also coming up on
Mm,
social media. Therapists are also on social media talking about how they work and their practices, which also informs expectations that people have going into therapy.
right.
There's also so many venues now that you can get therapy, and even so many
Yeah.
mediums that can come through, like, from face to texting and everything in between.
Yeah.
And yeah, things have been changing rapidly. And you and I have been alone in a lot of ways professionally. But when we come together
Yeah.
and we talk about it, we have very, very similar experiences and perceptions about how
Yeah.
things are changing and how people are affected by the changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you made a really good point too, in sort of the idea that like you and I are both in our own private practices, meaning that we're also kind of isolated in that way. A lot of therapists are. In fact, most therapists, when you're working one on one or even in groups, it's a different sort of thing, and it's important for us to have a space to process. But this is also an opportunity for us to share sort of what we've been witnessing, I guess, and working with and working through with a larger audience and maybe even a community of sorts in a
Mm-hmm.
way.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's an exercise for us in just being in a very different role. And we're going to be as vulnerable as we can here, without jeopardizing any of our clients' work, any of our clients' confidentiality.
Yes.
But just trying to give a little bit more of an insider's perspective into what it's like being a therapist today. And for people who have no experience in the field at all, it'll be revealing. And for those that have some work experience in this world, it should be pretty relatable.
Yeah, exactly. So really there's something for everyone. Like you don't have to have any knowledge or anything like that. We're not going to be, heavy on the jargon or the professional language with this. That's not our intention. We just kind of want to talk through the process of it and, yeah, what we're maybe not the process, but the profession, what we're seeing, how our thoughts about things in
Yeah.
therapy and in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I've ever said this exactly out loud to you, but I kind of think about this podcast as like if you were at a cafe or something and you realize you're sitting next to two therapists and you just start eavesdropping. Like, I think that's kind of what
Yeah.
this podcast is. Like,
Y-
we're
Yeah.
talking like we're in public, but it's real stuff.
It is, and it's not, we're talking like we're in public, but we're not in public.
Uh-huh.
So you are going to hear some stuff that we wouldn't just say anywhere, um, or in any setting. And I think that's the best analogy is to think of it as like we're in a coffee shop right now catching up as two therapists. This is
Right.
our our spot to do that and to talk through some of the challenges, the highs, the really wonderful things, and everything else about it.
Yeah. And all while leaving out any personal
Yeah,
information about our
yeah,
clients. That's
yeah.
super important. But we're going to be as revealing as possible about
Hmm.
our own perspectives. And
Yep.
it should be a pretty fun conversation. It's definitely one I've
Yeah.
been craving for a long time. So I'm
Me
happy to do
too.
this with you.
Same. I'm so happy that we're doing this, Julia. And yeah, I think that we're off to a good start. I just there's one other thing I wanted to mention, but I think I'm forgetting what it is. Um, oh yeah, you mentioned a little bit about this earlier. It's that sort of the discomfort with, both of us are kind of very comfortable as listeners, which is what we do all day. That's our job. I think there's another element too that's related, which is that as therapists, you know, we're taught to keep things private, to keep things to ourselves, to keep our clients private. That's a way that we take care of them. That's a way that we protect them. And some of this is also just from a professional perspective, it has been challenging to get used to. I think for both of us.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's been a long process, and it's been really interesting and eye opening for me anyway.
Yeah. Um, I guess maybe before we say goodbye for today, maybe we could each share what we found to be the most surprising aspect of this
Yeah.
journey through this to the start of our podcast.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay. I think for me the most surprising piece was there were many. So I but I think selfishly the most surprising piece, and I think this actually was for both of us a little bit, how uncomfortable I am in front of a camera. Just, and being center stage is not something that I'm used to, which is strange
Mhm.
because, I was a musician or professional musician for years, but very long time ago, that was my main thing. And I felt comfortable, but I was comfortable holding an instrument, not singing into a microphone or something like that. So that's probably a part of this too.
Mhm. Mhm. Just like how exposed and vulnerable
Yeah.
it feels. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as a therapist, you get to pay attention to other people all day and the focus is on
Yeah.
them and
Yeah.
we've become so comfortable with that. I mean, I that's just kind of my natural inclination, so that's an easy default for me. So this is yeah, not
Yeah.
not where I gravitate, but it's good to challenge yourself and do things
Yeah.
that feel uncomfortable and uh yeah, I mean that's a good one. I think also just I know I talked about this before, but like how many technical aspects need to be sorted out to do this? Um
Yeah.
because when we first started talking about it, we saw articles, 3 steps to starting your podcast or,
So misleading.
yeah.
It's not
And
that
just
easy.
yeah, kind of going through this process of like are we just missing something? Why does this
Yeah.
seem like it would be easy, but it's not? But I think after going through all this, I can confirm it's not. and, and therefore I'm proud of us for pushing through.
Same.
But I mean, yeah, I don't know why I don't know why it's so pervasive that it's so easy to start a podcast.
I was thinking about that because you and I had spoken. We've been, talking about the process also for a while. I don't know, but one thought that came to my mind is because there's so much like content online and things are so content driven with social media and stuff like that, people are just kind of vying for everybody's attention. That's how influencers make their money, right? So it's advantageous for people to be able to write a how-to that's simple, simplistic, and
Mm-hmm.
can make anyone want to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's my theory. But the
That's
truth is that
valid.
maybe it is, I don't know, maybe it's easier for some people, but it wasn't easy for us.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say if you don't have experience in this world, it's not easy.
Yeah.
But it is kind of a nice little example of how the real world and what you're seeing written in articles and tips and
Yes.
tricks and all that stuff don't necessarily match up.
Yeah, I think it's a really good reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they often don't match up.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so we'll be continuing to learn and
Yes.
chat, and we'll talk with everyone again next episode.
Yeah, I hope you tune in to the next episode, and we're really excited to be here. And feel free to let us know if you have any thoughts.
Bye.
Bye. You were just listening to Keeping Secrets, hosted by Sabrina Tropper and Julia Baum. If you like what you heard, leave us a review or a comment. We'd love to hear your suggestions, comments, questions, and topic requests. We do our best to respond to every single one, and you may even hear yours discussed in an upcoming episode. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts, and find us on Instagram and YouTube at Keeping Secrets Pod.
Keeping Secrets is the brainchild of Julia Baum and Sabrina Tropper, who also produced and directed this podcast. We're also responsible for all writing, research, graphic design, sound engineering, and video editing. Transcriptions by Riverside. As a reminder, this podcast does not constitute medical advice. While we strive to share the most accurate and up-to-date information, human error is to be expected, and this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes.